Okay, hi there. This is Christian Dye from Latitude West Financial, and thank you for joining me today. We will be talking about a new book that I have coming out called Priced Out. And it essentially gives solutions to an unaffordable housing market and how we could support our kids and or try to get into the market much faster. I have a long-term friend of mine named Ryan Runte, and he'll be joining me after my presentation just to fire some Q&A at me so we can get some dialogue and conversation going. What I want to do is I want to jump right in, but one of the first things that I want to say is that this webinar is not meant to be considered as direct financial advice. This is more of an educational webinar to give people some ideas on what they can do in order to either get into the housing market a little bit earlier, especially in expensive cities like Vancouver, or how to support their adult children to get into the housing market a little bit earlier as well. And I know it's a very popular topic now as well. So what I want to do is I want to jump right in and I want to talk about some of these solutions. It was actually my editor of my first book, Break Your Wealth Ceiling. The book talked about how to create wealth through real estate, kind of a bit of a blueprint plan. Highly recommend if you haven't picked up a copy to go get a copy just because it's inexpensive, it's cheap. You can get it on Audible, you can get it on Amazon. The new book priced out How Will Our Kids Buy Their Own Home? It's written, but it is not published yet. But stay tuned. At the end, we'll show you how to reserve a copy. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Christian Dye. I started a financial practice called Latitude West Financial here in Vancouver. We have clients all across Canada, though. It specializes in helping real estate investors to grow their portfolio. Um, I've also authored two books, and I have also been a guest speaker on many different podcasts and shows in order to help other people to navigate this various different real estate issues. So, jumping right in, what is our session today going to look like? We're going to understand the housing problem that we face currently and the one that's also soon to come. Why our kids need help and why they can't probably do it on their own in the way that the generation before was able to. We're also going to talk about the five solutions, the five mathematical solutions I came up with, and how to get started. I want to start by talking about the barriers to home ownership right now. And I think there's three of them. So the book describes this idea of catching a moving train. I want you to imagine, two generations ago, how hard it was. I mean, how entry into the housing market was. It was essentially like a train that's slowly moving. And, two generations ago, they kind of had to run quickly in order to catch that train. I'll give you an example of my in-laws. They immigrated here from Ireland. They had zero money. They came with a suitcase and a guitar. They landed in Vancouver. They had jobs within a week, and within a year, they had a down payment and had bought a home. Those days are gone, and that was the train moving slowly. You had to run a little bit and then you could catch it. My generation over here, my wife and I saved up really, really hard for 3 years. One income. We had dual income, but we saved off of one income. And saving off of one income, we were able to pay down our loans, student loans, and we were able to put a down payment on a house in 3 years of sacrifice. Those days are gone as well. Today, it's as if the train has already left. You're on the platform. It's going very, very, very quickly at 100 miles an hour, and you're trying to catch it. And we expect this next generation to do what our grandparents did, and what we did. It's not going to happen. The math doesn't show it. Dual income couple putting 30% away is still going to take them a decade in order to come up with a down payment. But the problem is, if it's a market like Vancouver, it may have moved so quickly that it's moving faster than they can ever catch it. So that's why I believe I have three daughters. I need to enter into the picture. Okay. So, price to income ratio, if you pick up a copy of my first or my second book, you're going to realize there's a lot of analysis and math in it. I don't like to just say things, I like to prove it mathematically. So, price to income ratio, what is that? It's household income compared to the average home price. And you can kind of use it as a basket from single family detached to condos, all townhouses, all mixed in there. So a very, very affordable market is a 3-to-1 ratio. $100,000 household income, and that will get you $300,000 home. So you might say, "Oh my goodness, where is that?" There are places in Canada that still exists where there's a $300,000 house, in the prairies or up north. And about 2 generations ago today, that was about the ratio, 3-to-1. If way back then, you could have a $10,000 household income and you could buy a $30,000 house. My parents' first home in Winnipeg was $30,000. Okay, and so when my wife and I 20 years ago bought our first home, it was a 5-to-1 ratio. I calculated it. So if you had a $100,000 household income, you could buy a $500,000 house. My wife and I, our first home was a $350,000 townhouse, 3-bedroom townhouse for 350,000. Our income, and that's what we were able to save up in those 3 years. Today, I've done the math here in Vancouver. It's the highest in Canada, 14-to-1. That means if you had a $100,000 household income today, you're looking at a $1.4 million home. And I know some people right now are thinking 1.4, it's more like 2.1, you know. And so, but remember, it's an average of both the houses and the townhouses and the condos. So today's reality, just the ratio alone, is going against this next generation. Now, the really shocker one is for the generation after this generation. So, in other words, for those young couples out there, this is for your children. Those ones, if Vancouver continues on the path that it's continued on for the last 25 years, and if our inflation to income increases at the same rate, obviously the two numbers are different. The next generation is 24 to 25-to-1. So can you imagine 25-to-1? So 100,000 household income needs to buy a $2.5 million average home. So right away, we want to get in front of this problem as fast as we possibly can because the math is working against us right now. Third reason, and I think this is one of the bigger reasons, is it just doesn't seem to be a generational priority for some people. And what I mean by that is some people have just thrown up their hands and say, "I give up, it's never going to happen." And that's what I'm fighting against. I don't want people to give up. I want you to go from a "it can't be done" to a "how can it be done" mentality, and that's where these creative solutions come into play. And there are even financial planning books by kind of younger financial advisors in the US, and they're actually saying to rent. They say, "You know what, it's not worth it. You should rent. This generation should rent." And some of these people who are writing the books, they rent. So they says, I'm wealthy, I rent, so why don't you rent?" So I'm going against that advice right away. I want traditional advice. I believe in home ownership. As a matter of fact, I believe in growing your wealth in real estate. So it's a generational priority of just giving up, don't give up. And as listening to the noise out there, don't listen to the noise. Do what your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents did and try to get into real estate. Okay. So why they need our help over here, of course, because the rules have changed for this generation, but they've changed in many ways. There's not only the 14-to-1 ratio that they're now facing, but it's also the high inflation of living, much, much, much higher than before. So now, and their rents, how can you save up for a down payment when your rent is 2,500 a month for a 2-bedroom, when you've got these crushing student loans, when you've got, you know, when was the last time you were in a restaurant and you took a look at a bill and says, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe how much, how much a Coke is, how much a hamburger is." So the rules have changed. Inflation is killing us, plus the high cost of living. One of the other reasons why we need to help, and this is more of a family issue, I call it the grandparenting gap. there's a chapter in the book that says, would you rather walk, fly, or drive to see your grandchildren in the future? And if the answer is, I don't want to have to fly, I don't want to be in their lives 3 times per year, I want to be in their lives 3 times per week. Well, if that next generation won't be able to afford, that's exactly what's going to happen, right? This unaffordable housing is going to lead to the breaking up of families and communities as being close-knit unit. Um, and the other thing is, I wanted the book to come up with win-win solutions. So I'm going to describe a win-lose solution. So let's say a hardworking couple had, 2 kids, and they saved up $1 million in their RSPs for their retirement. And then all of a sudden, their kids need help with housing, and they're convinced, yeah, I got to help them with housing. And they do the math, and they said, oh my goodness, they only qualify for half a million of mortgage. But the starting homes that they need are 800,000. So imagine $1 million, and you got to give each child 300 grand. And then now your retirement has gone from 1 million down to 400,000, and now you know, instead of eating steak, you're eating high-end tuna. Like what that's I call that win-lose. They win, you lose. I want win-win solutions where both of you are going to benefit, where these are great ideas, where both of you can prosper financially. So I want to dive in and I want to talk, and here's what we've all been waiting for. What are these 5 solutions? Got to stay hydrated here. All right, here they are. So the book calls them this: 3 for 30, co-investing, multi-generational living, early inheritance, and reverse mortgages. I'm going to go through each of them one at a time. At the end, Ryan's going to get have the opportunity to pick them apart, and to give kind of questions that he might have about them. Okay. So, what is the first one, 3 for 30? So, I'll give it to you very quickly at a high level. So, it's essentially when you actually have a couple, maybe graduated from university or a single person, and they're making good money. But if you do the math at their savings rate, 10%, 10% annual income, 20% annual income, it won't be enough to get them there. So, at saving about 10%, it'll still take you a decade to get into our housing market if you're starting from zero. So what I say the 3 for 30 is you sacrifice 3 years and it'll basically gain you 30. And the reason why it gains you 30 is because you enter into the housing market much faster. So my clients who have actually adopted this, of course, tapped onto their parents, their in-laws, their cousins, whoever, someone who would let them live either free or incredibly rent reduced for 3 years. So the math works like this. You're attempting to live off of 30% of your dual income, and then you're trying to save 70% of your dual income. If a dual income couple is making 130,000, I estimate they could save close to $91,000 per year. Over a 3-year period, that's $273,000. $273,000 is now injected as a down payment into a home. If it's a condo, it's like 30% down payment. If it's a house, it's a solid 10% down payment. And then you'd have to, of course, do the qualification. I did the math inside the book off of a $2 million house that this couple was now able to enter into with a solid, a little over 20% down payment. And what ended up happening is over 30 years, that home went from 2 million to 6.6 million in a 30-year time frame. Right away, that's tax-free equity plus it's a home, and so it comes from this book called The Psychology of Money. It was a man named Housel who wrote the book, and that's where I get this from. It was called the 3 for 30. So is it possible to do this? Maybe. Maybe you've already got the renter suite there. Is there a sacrifice? Absolutely. Imagine you're a young couple, young married couple, and now you got to live with your in-laws for 3 years. Of course, that's going to be a sacrifice. But financially, this might be the solution that gets you in there faster. Okay. The next one is called co-investing. This is probably my favorite. So here it's when you have parents, a grandparent, maybe an uncle, and they're investing and they've got money in real estate or they got money in the stock market, and you kind of approach them and you say, "Hey, how, you know." You kind of say, would you be willing to co-invest with me? And they says, okay, well, what does that mean? It means like whatever your down payment is needed. I'm going to use the arbitrary number of $200,000. He says, it'll take you, the young couple, it'll take you too long to come up with $200,000. Okay. If you made $100,000 per year and you save 20%, that's only 20 grand. It'll take us 10 years to make $200,000. And then by that time, the housing prices are even more. So imagine instead you get the $200,000 immediately and you already qualify for the mortgage. Okay. So in my book, I use $100,000 as an example. $100,000 for a $500,000. I use 500,000 because I feel that's an entry level, one bedroom somewhere. 200,000, of course, will get you more, maybe even get you a house. But the idea behind it is that you end up getting your down payment, you qualify for the mortgage, it's capital gains tax free. Now, where's the win-win part? It sounds like only one side is won. At some point, you're going to sell that property. It'll be tax free. At some point, you maybe you'll upgrade your home from a condo to a townhome. But when that happens, they can then draw their money back. So the co-investor, your parent, can now take their money back with interest. Okay, with interest. Our financial practice prides ourselves on being number crunchers. Okay, so a lot of times we do the numbers for you. So I'm going to give you an example. You get a 50-year-old, parent, and right now they're investing their money. And I use a non-registered account over here. Let's say it's 7%. So the market is giving them about 7%. They then help their adult child to buy let's say a nice two-bedroom condo, 750,000 with a $200,000 down payment. But that 200,000 is coming from the parent. So I'm gonna conservatively grow the condo at 5%. Now Vancouver shows higher than 5%, but I want to use conservative numbers. Houses are pushing 9%, 8, 9%. Condos are pushing 6, 7%. I'm gonna use a conservative 5. So off of this 5, so the home itself, of course, is since it'll be a primary residence, there'll be no taxation on it. The gift of the down payment is 200,000. The starting home value is 750,000. Of course, the parent has withdrawn $200,000 from their other investments, and now they are injecting it. So let's fast forward over here to 10 years. So now at age 60, the let's say the 22-year-old or the 20-year-old or the 23-year-old, 10 years later, they decide to upgrade the house. Parent decides, okay, I get my equity back. The equity back from the parent would be at a growth rate of 5% of the home. Their equity portion of the 200,000 is going to be 325,000. 325,000. If they just did a traditional investment at 7%, they would have had 300,000. And we could work the math backwards so we can hit that number on the spot. The parent could actually say, I want a 7% return on my money. Then you only owe them 301,000. So you could actually do the number. If they say I want an 8% return on money, we could work the number backwards. This model alone shows that you're actually better off of a 7% if the Vancouver real estate is going up at 5. Now, can you imagine if Vancouver real estate is going up at 6, 7, or 8? This number is going to be even better. So here's what the child gets, okay? Instead of you, if you said, you know what, that 200,000, I'm gonna have to give to my child at some point because me and my wife decide that we want our kids to stay close. So if you said, I got $200,000 right now, but in the future, I'm gonna give you money to help you with your home. Your 200 will grow to 300. You have to give them 300,000. You give them 300,000, you're out $300,000 now. If you do it my way, you co-invest 200, 10 years later, you get 325 back. That $750,000 house in 10 years is now 1.2 million. Mortgage balance is 392. The child gets the leftover equity, tax free. According to my numbers, that's $500,000. So not only did you make, let's call it 7, 8% on your money, the child actually gets half a mil of tax-free down payment equity for the next home. See, so what I want you to do is if co-investing works for you, absolutely. The numbers will be different for everyone. What if it's taken from my RSPs? Then of course I got to change the numbers. What if the growth rate is, 5%? What if the home value is, in a different market like Alberta? Okay, then the numbers change, which is why you want to work with a professional who knows what they're doing to see is this the solution for you. I hope this makes sense for you guys. Okay, let's keep going. Multi-generational living. What is that solution? This one over here is actually where your home is able to be suited to bring and to keep your family member in. Now, the way this is a little bit different than the 3 for 30 is because the child is actually investing in the home, such as a laneway home. So you kind of said, well, I'm just newly married. We're going to have kids soon. So me living in your basement, one bedroom basement suite is probably is not going to work out for me and my partner. But then you said, well, wait a minute. What if, we can't afford an $800,000 two-bedroom condo and we can't afford a $2 million house? But since you already have the land and now you're zoned for, all these places are zoned for fourplexes and sixplexes, but now you're zoned to put at least 4 units. Well, what if I paid for the construction build of a laneway home or the construction build of creating a nice fancy two-bedroom suite in the house. So you're actually bringing money in because you got a job and you could finance a $400,000 build, but you can't afford an $800,000 home. So what you're actually doing is co-investing inside with your parents. But now if I'm co-investing here, how am I going to get my equity out when it's time for me? So you get your equity out because the value of the property has gone up. When the value of the property goes up and you decide to live there for 6 years, you have an agreement where this is the amount of equity I now need to take out. Now, here's where it gets tricky. The only way to take out that equity is either the parent would have to give you that form because maybe they have investments elsewhere where they could give it to you. But if they don't, they might need to take it out as a line of credit or to remortgage the home to bring that money out. But remember, their home has gone up in value. I'm doing this quite quickly. The book explains it a little bit better with better numbers. Okay, so that's multi-generational living. Early inheritance, this is another one. So early inheritance, I describe this way. First of all, we do not want to affect your retirement. So for some people, they have multiple properties and they have, multiple accounts, TFSAs, RSPs, non-registered. They work with a financial advisor and they kind of say, when are you going to retire and how much do you need to retire off of? So let's say 5 million. I'm just going to throw the number out there. It says in your retirement, you would need 5 million. You have $4 million now, but when you retire in 15 years, you will need $5 million to live comfortably. But in 15 years, their actual 4 million will have grown to, let's say, 9 million. So if they said, if I'm going to need 5 million comfortably, what's going to happen with that extra 4 million? He says, well, you're not going to spend all of it in your lifetime. You will probably pass away, and that 4 million will now be distributed to each of your four children at a million each. He says, okay, that makes sense. So that last 4 million you're not going to touch in your lifetime. It's just going to be inherited. Well, if we the present value of that last 4 million might only be $200,000 now, 20 years earlier or 30 years earlier. What if we gave that money to the each child now, or the child that needs to get into the housing market? So first, there's a lot of math to be calculated. One, we don't want to affect your retirement. We don't want to affect your wealth. Okay, I find that win-lose. Win-win is where it says they're going to get the money anyway, but they're going to need it significantly more when they're trying to get into a housing market than when I pass away and these guys are already in their 40s or their 50s. So I do the math that actually shows why this early inheritance works very, very well. But I hope you understand kind of the overview behind it. So I'm going to do a quick a comparison as well. So the last one is called a reverse mortgage. And a reverse mortgage is kind of when somebody doesn't have the wealth to pass to their kids. I don't have 200 grand to pass to my kids. They also aren't comfortable with taking out a line of credit to pass to their kids either, because then someone has got to service the interest. Maybe maybe the adult child can't afford to service the interest, and maybe the parent can't afford to service the interest. But the parent does have a house. Okay, so the math that I showed in the book was a $1.6 million house. Okay. And the $1.6 million house had a very small mortgage still left on it. I picked a number that reverse mortgage would qualify for, and I picked the number 500,000. So the 500,000, but they didn't use the full 500,000. The child only needed 200,000. So the reverse mortgage took 200,000 and gave it to the child early as possible, early 20s, so that they could buy a home. Nothing had to be serviced. Now we have a adult child with a down payment, and we've got a parent who does not have to service anything, with the equity from their home being tapped in, which they intended to give them some money anyway, or wanted to help them anyway. Again, you use a financial advisor to see how much of this wealth you are relying on for your own retirement, and if you were comfortable it's sort of like an early inheritance. But it's taking the equity out of your home. So the math that I showed was this. I had a $1.6 million home. And in over 20 years, $1.6 million home here in Vancouver ends up growing to a $6 million home. But you took a $200,000 reverse mortgage on it. I used the 6.7% interest rate, which is a very, very high interest rate. But remember, you don't have to service it. That $200,000 debt grows to about $800,000. It's about $860,000. But remember, it's the house itself that's paying it off. When this house is sold, or if the parent dies, that's when the reverse mortgage is paid out. So you go from $6 million of wealth down to $5 million of wealth. But here's the thing, that $200,000 loan was used to buy a $1 million house for the child. That $1 million house 20 years later is now worth $3.8 million. Okay, that's the math that it shows inside the book. So right away, yes, there's $800,000 depleted in wealth, but there's a $3 million wealth that I've helped my child to incorporate right away. Plus, all the savings from not having to rent. So now those are the five solutions really quickly. The math that I do in my practice is help clients to figure out, well, which is the right solution? Is it a reverse mortgage? Is it an early inheritance? So what we do is we crunch the math to try to narrow down to see which scenario is best. So there's a macro and a micro. The micro is, what does the math show? If you said, oh, the two that I think I'm narrowing down to is going to be the reverse mortgage or the early inheritance. Okay, but which is the better one? Both of them both of them, it's either $200,000 coming in out of the reverse mortgage, or it's a $200,000 that I'm giving from my wealth and giving to them early. But remember, so the way we would compare it is using something called opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of the investment, and reversing, we're looking competing against the final value of how much the chip mortgage, the reverse mortgage is taken. So I'm not going to go through the math. It's a little bit too early in the morning for that, but I'll just show you in this one particular scenario, under all of these, all this criteria that I've entered, we want the lower of the number. By doing the reverse mortgage, we're going to lose out $1.1 million in interest costs from the equity of our home. But the opportunity costs lost for the investment opportunity is 1.5 million. So we want the lower number. So right away, in this particular scenario, the reverse mortgage actually makes more sense. So if we had a client who said, I can do I could do the reverse mortgage, or I could do the early investment, I don't know which one to do. They want to work with a professional who could figure this out for them. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a bonus. This is my bonus, okay? The bonus is one, and this is one that I use myself, and that is prioritize early. If anyone is listening right now and they actually have a child under the age of, like, I'm going to say 10, you might want to think of reprioritizing your RESPs or other investments and instead investing with the intention of having a home for your child. And I know the very first thing when somebody has a newborn, they're not thinking of housing. They're actually thinking of course the child's education. But I'm kind of shifting that narrative. I could think of multiple ways that a child can go to school. They can go to scholarship, they can get a student loan, heaven forbid, they can work, they can stay local. If you stay at a local school, it's not that expensive. You know, you could probably fund it with a summer job. But how many different options are there for your child to come up with a down payment on a house? There's pretty much two options, you or them. I've already told you that them on a 25 to 1 ratio probably isn't going to happen. So then it comes back to you. Well, when was the best time to buy real estate? 20 years ago. Well, if you have a 20-year head start for your child, then why don't we start thinking of the problem now? So one way to do it is to kind of say, I actually have enough money to buy a pre-construction condo. I have enough money to buy a rental property out in Alberta, whatever it happens to be. And then you might say, this money, instead of using my TFSA's RSP money, why don't I inject it and buy some real estate with the intention of this equity in this real estate going towards my child? That's what I would do. And that's what I did. When my kids, I have three girls under the age of, sorry, I have three girls, but at the time they were all under, in 2008, they were all under the age of 5. I bought a house out in Abbotsford. It was $340,000. The intention was I would use the equity of that to fund either their education or their housing or both. I had no idea how much it would grow to, but I did the math conservatively and I knew I would have at least $400,000 of equity versus my RESPs, which I felt would land at about 100,000. Today, that house has far exceeded my expectation. Is probably worth somewhere between a million to maybe 1.1. If the market's a little bit down right now, maybe it's somewhere in the nines. But right now, I've already got one bullet in the chamber ready to go. I have a 20-year-old daughter, and now it's in our sights of where is this, before the age of 22, 23, market is low right now. What is, she's the first one that we need to work this on. But I prioritized it when she was 5 years old, right? I prioritized this when she was 5 years old. So there's my bonus one over here. Plus, if you're not investing in real estate, it helps to diversify your investments, of course. And because of compound interest and leverage, of course, because you're borrowing from the bank, of course, that will maximize the growth. Okay, so um, what type of a plan do we want to create? How to build one? Well, first thing you got to do is you got to gather resources. Who's out there that might be able to help? You need family collaboration and you need goal setting. What is the time frame? I know for my daughter, my first daughter, we've got probably a 3-year time frame where this is going to happen. It could happen in 6 months from now. It could happen in 3 years from now, but we do have a time frame for this to happen. So, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have enough time here for questions and bring Ryan in. So what are your next steps as a family? Start a conversation with your, parents, your grandparents, or whoever it happens to be who might have some money. Get and engage an advisor who specializes in real estate wealth building, and then also, basically create a plan for your family situation. Okay. Questions. Okay, Ryan, my good friend Ryan. Ryan is a family man. He's in the real estate industry as well as he's an investor. So I thought Ryan would be really good to kind of fire some questions. So we've pre-made some questions, and if there's any time at the end, then we're going to open it up to the chat. Ryan, I'd like us to have a little bit of a conversation, but why don't you kick us off here?
Sure, sounds good. Um, yeah, it's kind of makes you think, do I have to cancel my dinner reservations now? Scary. Um, I was trying to do math, it's too early. Yeah, I mean, definitely I've come across this as well in my practice. With early inheritance, we see quite often now. It's interesting to see your perspective. Yeah, I mean, I guess how can we protect our initial investment while still enabling their home ownership?
Yeah, yeah. So right away, a lot of people are, aren't I technically giving over this money and isn't it now in their name? What if there is a
Yeah.
falling out? So that's a big one. So obviously there's a pretty big trust component. We work with several fantastic legal teams that help us to essentially, there's the quick answer. You can come up with a legal document where technically you're gifting it, in actuality, you're co-investing it, but legally you're lending it, which means that you actually have a legal document which says you need to pay this back. And that would kind of map out pretty good if there was a falling out or if there was
Hmm.
a spousal relationship later down in the future that ended up not working. You're trying to protect your equity. You're trying to ensure that it lands in the right hands. Okay. All
All
right.
right.
What's the next one?
Our home isn't big enough. What are some other ways we can use our existing property to help our child get into the market?
See, th this would probably be a much trickier one. If you don't have the cash and you want to get them into the market, but you can't kind of do this, I'd probably say go play out the reverse mortgage. Reverse mortgages have a little bit of a bad history just because they have high interest rates. But the only thing is, if the math works, remember, a high interest rate versus a very, very quickly, rapidly moving housing market. The housing market is going to beat the high interest rate. Okay, so that's one thing that I found. Like the interest rate would have to be very, very high in order for this not to make sense. All right, keep going.
All right. So for early inheritance, what's the best way to discuss with my child without creating a sense of entitlement or impacting our retirement plans?
Yeah. So I think here it really is a conversation that you need to have because you might this is I think the largest barrier that I find people have is they say, you know, I don't want my kids to feel entitled. I don't want to feel this thing is waiting. So suddenly they're not going to work as hard or study as hard because they know that, hey, this thing is going to land in my lap anyway. So why don't I chill out a little bit? And I have a part-time job, but I don't have to save that much for it. Um, but I think the conversation really is talking to your child about the sacrifice that you're making, how you're helping them, and your expectation is to continue. Like one way that you could kind of do it is a matching program and says, I'll match everything that you have, especially if you do the math and you feel that the two of you can get there together instead of me just giving you this, like you could almost say, you could blend some of them. You could say, hey, listen, you guys are about to get married. Stay in the house. I know it's a sacrifice. Pull out, a year to a year to 2 years. We're gonna match everything. It looks like you're on a trajectory that you could probably save 100 grand. We'll match your 100 grand. There's 200 grand. There's your down payment. That way, there isn't this feeling of entitlement, and also it helps you to still have this conversation. Okay.
Oh yeah. So this I've come across as well. So if parents do help, how does this affect the other siblings?
Hmm. This is where the math and the
Yeah.
conversation get a little bit tricky. This is where it starts to get a little bit tricky. So, I'll use my example here. I have three siblings. If I had my parents helping one of us
Hmm.
doesn't have a home, and the other two already have a home, and you have a fourth one that also doesn't have a home, how does this end up working out? So if they decide to go the reverse mortgage route, remember that's depleting the inheritance of everyone else as well. If they decide to go the early inheritance route, how does this affect things if you don't land where you think you were going to land? So, I said, oh, we were going to land with an extra 4 million. What if you only land with an extra two and one of the siblings already got their share early?
Hmm.
So right away, this is where conversations have to happen. And I said there was a micro and a macro. And the micro is me doing the math, saying this is the better solution. The macro is having a conversation and involving other people, having like an ironclad will, having or a trust or something of that sort in place. But I think the conversation since every scenario is unique, probably involving a third party professional would be the quick answer because every scenario is so unique. Trying to sort it out yourself could cause some rifts as well. But you kind of want everything on paper. If you have everything on paper, then there's a set plan, especially if there's a premature death. So a will, of course, would be part of it. All right.
Um, yeah, is a reverse mortgage a last resort due to the high fees?
Yeah, I often find that people, because of the negative effect of the reverse mortgage, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I definitely don't want to do a reverse mortgage. That's like a no-no in the financial industry." But the quick answer is it's not. If the numbers work, like I'm not sure that the numbers would work if you do a reverse mortgage in a flat market, let's say like Winnipeg or something like that. But in a growing market where you've got real estate increasing at, let's say, 8, 9% annually, and a reverse mortgage, yes, our mortgage rates might be at 4 and theirs might be at 6. But that's why it's so important to do the math, and would I say it's a last resort? Not necessarily. Not necessarily, because some people say, I don't want to pull from my registered and non-registered investments. They say, I don't want to take out a line of credit. Or they say, I don't want to, cash in some of my real estate in order to do this, but I do want to help. And, someone's sitting on a $4 million house and they kind of know that when they downsize it, they're only going to downsize to a condo. They'll probably only need 1 million of it. They said, yeah, just take it out of the house. All right.
How do you recommend families handle potential disagreements or changes in circumstances such as a divorce to ensure the long-term success? Yeah, I've come across this too with practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again, this is going to be a tricky one. So first of all, whenever you're passing over any sort of wealth or equity, you want some constraints. So one of them, and a prenup kind of has a bit of a negative connotation to it.
Yeah.
So now we kind of use the word cohabitation agreement. Cohabitation agreements are essentially, a lot of young people are moving in together before they marry, or they're just moving in together and not even marrying and staying as a couple. Then all of a sudden, then potentially they might break up. What happens with the wealth that potentially was, with our laws now, cohabitation is looking very, very similar to a marriage.
Hmm.
So if I in my will have wealth earmarked for my child and they were cohabitating and they split up or they married and then divorced, what's going to happen there? But what if this wealth came in the form of housing? What if they said, hey, my father is going to help me to buy a home, and now my long-term boyfriend decide and I decide to live together, and now there's equity growth that's created. I highly, highly recommend you got to have a cohabitation agreement, because it's not about the strength of their relationships. Isn't it like a prenuptial agreement? So yes and no. Yes, there's some financial implications that it's trying to protect, but no, it has nothing to do with your relationship. It has everything to do with my wealth being ensuring that it stays in the right hands. So I think, involving someone, with a legal background and with the experience, to kind of say, well, if I'm going to do this, what's to make sure that I do it right? So I play out every case scenario, such as a breakup, such as a change in job, such as, a premature death. So a goodwill, good cohabitation agreement, a side addendum saying that if this is a gift, of course, it's coming back. So there are legal methods of protecting yourself, protecting everyone involved in this. Um, I think this over here was kind of how I wanted to end. I'm going to open it up to see if there's questions from people on the live webinar here. So if you have a question, now's the time to put it in the chat. Uh, and I think, from my practice, what is a simple first step is we created a tool which is in the form of a survey. It kind of has a series of questions and it dissects each of the 5 solutions. If you were to answer this and send it back to us, we're going to take a first round look at it. Now, again, I must emphasize this would not be considered direct financial advice. It's just a guide to say out of your scenario, out of the 5 solutions, these top two, or this is probably the one that's best suited for you. That's a simple first step. working with our team, complementary tool to kind of send you to help you. In the same way that I wrote the book to help people, this tool can be used to help people as well. Okay. So that over there is kind of a simple first step is doing the survey. Um, as I field these questions, um, I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to take down some information. If you would like the evaluation tool to explore the five solutions, you could connect this through the QR code and just tell us what you want. Or you could email one of my team members at admin@latitude-west.ca. Uh, if you would like to say, I'd love to read the book because it explains things a little bit more and shows a lot of case examples. The book will be released in the next few months. To pre-book a copy, we'll notify you when it's ready and how best to receive it. Then my assistant Melissa at latitude-west.ca, and she's also the one to connect if you wanted to have a further discussion. Okay, so I'm going to jump into a few of these questions over here. Here we go. Uh, so one person asks, can you share the recording of this video? And the answer is yes. I'm recording this video, and anyone who would like a copy of this video, by all means, request it. We'll probably request it through Melissa. And the reason is because you might want to share this with your parent. You might want to share it with a family member who's thinking of doing this, or maybe you're the parent and you want to share this with your child and say, "Hey, I want you to listen. There's a generational living solution that Christian has that I think is going to work for us." Okay. Um, does this work if the property is a rental held in the children's hands? Great question. Great question. So what if instead of it being their primary residence, it's actually a rental property, but it's put under the child's name? So the quick answer is yes, but the two things you got to remember here is if they're not living in it, then the capital gains tax-free exemption is removed. If they move into it eventually, which is a great idea, they won't need the two-bedroom condo for another 5 years. They're still living at home. Why don't I get it? Why don't I rent it out? And then why don't I move them in later? Then it is primary residence, but there still probably would be some taxation on the growth that CRA would want to collect. So that's a great case scenario. Christian, what if it's in Alberta and they never live in it? They never live into it. You want to kind of work with an accountant, good advisor as well, to kind of say, okay, what are the tax implications going to be when they eventually sell this, take the equity, and then move it over. Also, what are we losing in first-time home buyers, and also who's going to qualify? If they're 22, they're a young engineer and they qualify, they just need a down payment, and then they're going to rent it out themselves. That's one thing. If they're 20, they don't even qualify. Um, then there's some creative things you could do. Maybe your line of credit, let's say it's a $500,000 condo, rental property out in Alberta, but your line of credit is large enough to buy out the whole thing. Then there is no mortgage. So there's nothing to qualify for. Put it under the child's name. Child is 25, 26 years old. Now they could afford the mortgage because now they're working. Put them on the mortgage, you pull back your line of credit. So yes, absolutely it does work if you have a rental property that you're buying on behalf of the child, of their name. The one thing is you might have to either use the full line of credit, or might need to co-sign on the mortgage. If you co-sign on the mortgage, that means essentially you're the one responsible. And if the only thing you got to watch out over there is you got to be a little bit careful if you were planning on buying something yourself. So if you said, "Oh, my wife and I were going to upgrade our home, but we did this thing for our child and it used up $600,000 of our capacity," now you have $600,000 less of your capacity. Okay. Um, can I share a little bit about my services at Latitude West? Yes, absolutely. Okay, great question. So at Latitude West, I have a financial planning team, and I work with young families. My team and I work with young families as well as other investors to help them with financial planning. So what is financial planning? It's investing, it's budget planning, it's insurance, it's retirement planning, it's estate planning. So wait a minute, that sounds like everything a regular financial advisor does, which is what we are. But the one difference is we focus a lot on the real estate. A lot of our clients want us to help us with very complex real estate issues. Because I'm a real estate investor myself, I can speak the same language because my intentions is to grow your real estate. We're moving in the same direction. What we find is some other financial advisors, they sometimes don't know what they're doing on the real estate side, or even worse, they're negative real estate. They're encouraging them not to buy more real estate. Because, think about it. You might say, you have $1 million with me, I'm your financial advisors, and you want to take out $300,000 to co-invest with your child, well, that's coming out of money will be coming out of my pocket because I'm compensated through those investments. So they might say, it's not a good time or it's not a great idea or I wouldn't recommend that, and then all of a sudden you get things that are kind of, non-intentionally to your benefit. Whereas I'm trying to get all of my clients to buy more real estate. I'm trying to get their kids into the housing market faster, but a lot of people are stuck in saying, does this financially make sense? Is it a good idea for me to withdraw a bunch of a reverse mortgage from my home in order to get my child into a property? So I do the math. That's my financial practice. To learn a little bit more about my financial practice, the best way to do it is to just book a complimentary first meeting, and then we'll just talk about your scenario. I'm not the right fit for everyone, right? I'm not the right fit for everyone. I'm not free. I am compensated through various different methods, but a conversation is absolutely a great starting point. Okay, next question. While the child's property appreciation will be tax-free when they sell, how will they be able to transfer the money back to the parents without being it considered as a parent's income by CRA? Great question, and I'm not going to answer it, especially not on a recorded video. I'm going to say to work with your accountant to see what that looks like. Even if there is a tax implication on the way back, one of the things you could do is calculate the tax implication, and then I can help you with that, and to say, is it still worth it? Yeah, there still might be a tax implication, but is it still worth it to be able to do that? So potentially there could be a tax implication. Like I said, I'm not giving direct advice. I'm just giving guidance over here. You want to kind of work with, and you always want to work with accountant, a good accountant with all of these decisions as well. All right, here's the next one. If a grandparent puts a reverse mortgage on a home, oh, I like the way we're thinking now. I like the way we're thinking. Put the grandparent on the reverse mortgage on a home. Can their children put a regular mortgage on it later and pay out the death, the total debt after death? So the quick answer is you need to consult a mortgage advisor as well as the accountant. But to my best understanding, the answer is yes. To my best understanding, the answer is yes. So whenever a mortgage is put on a property and the child it doesn't qualify for it yet, they're still whatever, finishing up their master's degree. You could always put the mortgage on later. When you put the mortgage on it later, the bank is just giving you this money. What you do with the money, oh, I'm paying out the reverse mortgage, or I'm paying out the line of credit, or I'm paying out, wherever it happens to be. Absolutely. Like what I'm hoping to do with my daughter is she is still in school right now. She goes to BCIT. She probably won't have the real job for probably at least another 2 years, 2 to 4 years. But when she gets the real job, she will probably only afford for a small portion of the mortgage anyway. I want to inject and get that. I'm aiming for a two-bedroom condo so that she can get a roommate to help pay down the mortgage. So I'm aiming to get that two-bedroom condo sooner rather than later. Why? Market's low right now. It's a great time to get into the market if you don't have to sell right now. Why don't we inject this thing over here in order to get her name on it? And then our intention is it's local. We want to stay locally here in our neighborhood. So our intention is that she actually moves into it at some point. That way, we know that she's close. By doing a two-bedroom, we also know she could start a family in there and last at least another 5 years. First 5 years with a family. So for us, it makes sense. And here's a question that I don't think anyone has asked yet. What if the condo being rented doesn't generate any cash flow and there's a negative? We have our our math can take care of that to still see if it makes sense. Does the negative on the rental still make sense over here? Okay, let's keep going over here. Do you have any accounting services that has real estate expertise? We work with accountants and we have an internal accountant. So our internal accountant we often lean on. So whenever you're working with us, you're leaning on expertise of an entire team of people, legal, accounting, of course, financial advising, insurance. And then we're there to present you with the different options or navigation options. So first we kind of do a discovery to collect information, and then we do a navigation to sort of say, these are the different things that we're going to recommend that you do. If you want to work directly with our accountant, then we'll set you up. But if you have your own accountant, then we would work with them as well. The one thing about do you have any recommendations? Maybe set up a meeting with us and then we could discuss that. A lot of the really, really good ones that we sort of find are kind of busy and aren't taking some new clients, but you never know. We could always ask. Okay. Um, is it just one lender that does reverse mortgages? So the quick answer is no, no, it's not. But the one thing I do say, if you went to one lender, I would say use a different advisor. We have several advisors that we would recommend for that. Because you want them to do a little bit of shopping around for you. I know Equitable Bank, you mentioned Equitable Bank. I do know that they do it, but I also know other companies that do it. I'd rather not say it on here because I actually don't have permission for me to use their name. Would it be better to co-invest through a FHSA with your child or when they are ready to buy a house? How is co-investing through FHSA? Okay, so now you got to remember when I use the word co-investing, I'm actually saying that the property is already being bought. I'm not saying that I'm contributing to their or I'm contributing to their TFSA. The book is describing by me co-investing, I'm actually taking my money and buying a home with the child. So that's how I'm using the word FHSA. Sorry, that's how I'm using the word co-investing. I think you're using it as you're actually contributing to theirs. So it's a little bit of a different question that you brought up over here. So really, it's not about me giving the money in order to invest, but you could do that. Absolutely, you could do that, and then you could say, well, technically that's my money, and then we're going to use it. So if you wanted to blend it that way, but that way you're actually giving them money so they can do it through an FHSA. So, what I wanted to do, I wanted to be respectful for the webinar, and I said it would be a 1 hour, and I think we're coming to that mark right now. So, once again, you guys know how to get in touch with me. It was absolutely fantastic. I feel that we went through this stuff really, really quickly. Sign up for the pre-registration of the book. When it's ready, I think you should get a copy. I think you share it with as many people as you possibly can. I'm going to put the book on Amazon and it's going to be inexpensive. Why? Because I want everyone to read it. I want everyone to read it. If you want to reach out and have a conversation, as I said, reach out to Melissa or scan the QR code. I do have a newsletter as well to try to keep people up to date. But by all means, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Ryan, for pelting me with all these questions and being kind of always a trusted friend of mine, who also we both share kids and we're both trying to figure out what to do in order to get them into the market early. So I'm going to sign off over here. I'm going to say thank you guys for coming and I hope to see you guys at the next one.